today's mental health panel, You Are Not Alone, the first in a series sponsored by the Association of Chinese Americans, or ACA. Just a bit of background, ACA is a 501c3 nonprofit established in 1972 and the founding chapter of the Organization of Chinese Americans, OCA, with over 50 chapters and affiliates across the US. ACA promotes the general welfare of Chinese Americans and the Asian Pacific American community. And I and my family and my grandparents have been very lucky and blessed to be part of the ACA community and to have benefited from the great programming, support, and educational opportunities that they've offered. So without further ado, I would love to introduce ACA President Chen to give a few words of introduction.
All right, good evening. Just want to say hello. And on behalf of the Association of Chinese American Board of Directors, welcome everyone for joining us tonight for the workshop. For those of you who are in Michigan, you probably know us very well, but for our out-of-state participants, maybe we have some. ACA, like Joyce mentioned, ACA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on enhancing the image and well-being of Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans in the Detroit area. We are the Detroit chapter of OCA Asian American Advocates, which is a national organization that has 50 chapters throughout the country. Locally, we operate multiple centers that provide preventive healthcare, social, cultural, and educational and advocacy programs. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to join ACA activity, and hopefully we will see you more in the future. And also I'd like to thank all the speakers for sharing your knowledge and experiences with the community at this very difficult time. I also want to recognize our VP, the superwoman I know, and the chair of the ACA Activity Committee, Sharon Dao, for putting this wonderful event together with her very capable hands. So Sharon, it's yours.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Hello, everyone. This is Sharon Dao, and also would like to welcome you to join this virtual mental health workshop. We were going to have this event at our Chinese Community Center. However, due to the COVID-19, the pandemic, the lockdown, we have to move everything up to virtual. So today we are the virtual ACA and virtual Chinese Community Center. I'd like to welcome everyone to this wonderful virtual world to join us. For our speakers today, we do have Dr. Chen from New York, but she's going to join us from Taipei, Taiwan. It is the local time 8 o'clock in the morning, so we want to thank her for joining us from that far and that early. And we also have Joyce from California, and she's going to join us from our local Detroit. And the other two speakers are also from our local Detroit. So I see this generates a very interesting map when we're talking about where the speakers coming from. I do see this is a very good opportunity or advantage we can take it from COVID-19. I think it worked out very well from my perspective. Hope everybody enjoyed the virtual world. Like this. And we greatly appreciate our speaker team for spending their time with us and also sharing their knowledge and experience, and hope whatever we are delivering today can benefit our friends that are online with us tonight. Support-wise, we also very appreciate our wonderful support from our OCA National, and also along with our sibling chapters across the United States, including, for example, we have Chicago, we have Chicago, Cleveland, and also Columbus, and many other chapters as well. We're happy to have this opportunity to work together as part of OCA family, and I think this is a new milestone for us. Meantime, I also want to appreciate our partner organizations from our local as well as outstate. For example, the NAP Chicago, and also our wonderful local Michigan School of Psychology and many other, along with many other organizations here. We do want to welcome everyone and also thank everyone for the wonderful support. All right, so that's, without any further ado, I think it's the time to turn over back to Joyce our moderator and the hostess is to continue to start the session.
Thank
Joyce,
you
go
so much,
ahead.
Sharon.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for the members of the audience, please remember to connect with ACA either at www.acadetroit.org or facebook.com/DetroitACA. And so without further ado, I would love to introduce our panel of speakers. We have Dr. Fran Brown, President and Chief Executive Officer of Michigan School of Psychology, Dr. Chen, Associate Professor, Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience, National Central University in Taiwan, and Pearl Stewart, Licensed Professional Counselor in Perspectives Counseling Center in Troy, Michigan. So I'll let each of the speakers give their own introduction to tell you a little bit more about why this topic is so important and also a bit about their background. And as for myself, as I mentioned earlier, have really appreciated growing up in Michigan, the amazing community and resources that ACA has provided. It's so important, especially in times of stress and duress, to really leverage community and to think about how important it is. And I've also been very lucky, but also went to school in a lot of high stress environments at Harvard and other Ivy League institutions in which mental health was not something that everyone talked about, and particularly in the Asian American community. So I'm personally just so grateful and think that this is such an important conversation to have. So Dr. Brown, we'll start with you with introductions.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm so honored to be joining all of you tonight. I am the president of the Michigan School of Psychology. We're located in Farmington Hills, Michigan. We are a humanistic institute of psychology, which means that we celebrate the value and dignity of all human beings, and that we believe that healing and growth begins within each one of us. The better that we can be, the best our communities can be. In addition to I received my master's and doctorate degrees from the Michigan School of Psychology and never left. I've held a couple of different positions there and was selected president 2 years ago. One of my presidential platform items is to increase the cultural competency of our institution so that we can increase the cultural competency of our students. Anytime I get to do something like this is very gratifying for me, and also I learn a great deal. That is why this discussion is important to me, and also to show up as an ally for all communities. I know the importance of allies and the need for outside support for all of our multicultural communities. So thank you very much for allowing me to do that with you today, and I hope I can contribute to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Dr. Chen?
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Dialing in from Taiwan.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. I see my mic is on. Sorry. Thanks for letting me know. This is May. It is a pleasure to be here, and I really I have to thank the virtual meeting. Otherwise, I won't be able to join you at this time, even if I were in the U.S. I am a immigrant to the U.S. from Taiwan, and I went to the U.S. when I was 15. Got into psychology. Almost from the beginning as a major in college at UCLA, and then I really enjoyed applied psychology. So I got my master's in organization or business psychology from Columbia, and then I worked in the industry at Citibank for many years before returning to school to study social and health psychology. Since then, I've gone into many different areas in psychology, including clinical, health, forensic, and a lot of applied as well as academic areas, during which I have also crossed between industry and schools. And within schools, I have worked with and taught at different types of universities, from public, such as City University of New York, to private, such as NYU, New York University, And also cross-culturally here right now, I spend my time in two places. I have my clinical practice in New York, which I appreciate going online these days. And I also work at the National Central University in Taiwan. Among all these experiences, I felt probably the most not alone, but as a minority, was working for the Department of Defense in the US, teaching at the military academy, the US Military Academy at West Point, where I was really a triple minority. I was one of two Chinese professors there. The other one was teaching Chinese. So I was really, you know, the only one that they would see in required courses. And I was, you know, I was female there with about 10%. So obviously I'm a woman. And also civilian population there was about 10%. So I was civilian. So such experience have allowed me to appreciate being a minority and what it's like, and the importance of knowing that we're really not alone in this. So it is really a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. And we'll have Pearl give her introduction.
Thank you, Joyce. Hi, everyone. My name is Pearl Stewart. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I do work in Troy. From a young age, my first experience with mental health was probably with a lot of misdiagnosed mental health issues of a lot of people in my family, as well as people that I knew in the Asian community. And I really, from a young age, I realized a lot of barriers, internal and external barriers to reaching mental health resources and accessing the help that they needed. And I realized that there was a stigma that a lot of my friends that weren't Asian didn't have to deal with. But then later on, I learned that we all have a stigma no matter what background we're from. And so that's the finding purpose that really pushes us forward to try to seek out more mental health resources and try to advocate more. So I did my undergrad at Michigan State in psychology and community relations, and that's kind of where my advocacy kind of took root. And then I went to Loyola University in Chicago, where I studied counseling as well. And at my practice currently, it's an outpatient practice, and I specialize in women's issues, grief and loss, trauma, dialectical behavioral therapy, and the severely mentally ill. I did my internship in Chicago at the Denson Center of Recovery, which is a population of the severely mentally ill. And I really found my stride there and really realized that there's really a lot more that binds us and connects us than really separates us. And I've really found myself to be an advocate for that, especially in impoverished communities. So I love being here. You know, like the title of our thing today, You Are Not Alone. Perspectives Counseling Center, our tagline is "You Need Not Walk Alone." So it's very aligned with our message today, and I really do try to embody that in my practice as well. So I'm really glad to be here today to talk about a really important reason.
Thank you. Well, all three professionals are just so accomplished, as everyone can tell, and also so accessible and passionate. So I encourage the audience throughout the course of this conversation to send messages over the chat box and to engage with our speakers. To kick off, a couple of questions came up over the course of even preparing for this, and all three of you have spoken to this in different ways. But what are some of the unique challenges that you see the Asian American community facing in seeking help, and especially during this time of COVID, when families are encountering, different setups where children are back home, where couples are spending a lot of time together? How has that impacted the communities you work with, and what are particular challenges of seeking help and even knowing that help is needed for some of these communities?
I'll start. As you're talking, I was thinking about various things, and something came to my mind consistently, which is when I work with particularly Chinese American children. I normally don't work with children, I work with parents and school teachers. And one thing I keep hearing is, my child is fine. She gets good grades in school. my child's fine. He just got into his ideal college. And so I think one challenge that I face a lot is I actually think Pearl had alluded to earlier that it is not only a stigma, but a lot of parents just don't see this as something that needs to be addressed, because as long as they get good grades in school, they must be fine. So I find that as a very a big challenge and barrier to try to communicate to parents in particular, and school teachers are better these days in terms of being open to that. But in the backdrop of COVID-19, I do see I guess the tradition of controlling parents come into play a lot. And no matter how old you are, if we're under the same roof, if I don't see it, that's fine. But if I see this, you got to follow my rule. So this kind of conflict I do see come into play more with the lockdown and with the quarantine across the US and also in Taiwan.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Definitely. And Pearl, she spoke directly to some of the things that you've addressed and that you've witnessed of stigma. What are some of these challenges that resonated with you and the clients that you work with?
Yeah, so I definitely can piggyback off of what Dr. Chen said. There's been a lot of barriers. A lot of them has been minimization, right? So like a lot of them is what Dr. Chen speaks to is, okay, they're fine, right? And on the surface, they might seem fine. And the reality is that a lot of them are emotionally neglected, right? And there's been a lot of the neglect from people who, our parents' generation and their generation before them, who did not see the need for it and did not know how to provide that. So then now we're left now in our generation of not knowing what we do need. So really realizing that we do first have that need for it. And second, how do we understand how to reparent ourselves and get that for ourselves? And also forgive what did not happen. And I think a lot of that reconciliation needs to happen as our own personal work. And a lot of clients do, they're able to find healing once they realize that, it's not worth anything to blame the previous generation, but this is how you can do better, right? Once you know better. Another thing is that, I think there's a lot of codependency that we see from the first and second generation, where, like you mentioned, Dr. Chen, like if they're all at home right now, right, we see it, it's exacerbated all in the same setting. Whereas before, let's say you're on the East Coast and West Coast and you don't have to see it, so it's not as prevalent. However, right now, when you see it, it's right in your face and you just want to control every single thing. And a lot of it's from projection from your own insecurities or your own lack of control. So I would say that I would really encourage us to take a look at ourselves first before we do blame the other person, saying that it's because of you that I'm acting this way, but really, instead of a reactive approach, take a more proactive approach and really analyzing our own selves.
I think I would just add that for non-Asian or non-Chinese therapists, it's really important to probe and explore issues with our Asian clients those that we come across, because I come from an Italian background, and so everybody knows how I'm feeling all the time. You cannot get me to be quiet at times. Whereas for other cultures, that's different. Can be more withholding, and not be real upfront about how you're feeling. So again, from the therapist's perspective, we can't just look at someone and measure how well they're doing, especially a child, from how they're performing in school. There's other things that we need to look at to make sure that they're getting their needs met.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Brown, you work with so many students at Michigan State University, and given that in the audience there are both students and parents of college-age students, could you speak a bit about some of the things that the university has done and what you've seen the transition has been for students as they deal with this new normal?
Yeah, so we are not associated with Michigan State University, although a lot of people think we are, and also with University of Michigan, because we're the Michigan School of Psychology. So I just wanted to clarify that. But, you know, our student body is kind of non-traditional. We have students that come right from undergrad. We offer master's and doctorate degrees. And then we have individuals who waited a long time, who've maybe been in practice for some time, then come back for their doctoral degree. I myself, during this time of COVID, I think that's what you're asking, is that not, Joyce?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm seeing happening with students of all ages is a pressure to be everything for everyone. I mean, you have students, all of our students are in clinical training, so they are doing telepsychology with their clients who are suffering from isolation and depression and financial worries during this time, which they themselves are dealing with, in addition to having children at home and trying to run therapy sessions. We've recently started up a program for our students where we are paying for them to get group therapy. We don't know who's going. We don't know what they're talking about, but you know, we feel a responsibility to support the supporters in this. These are the silent first responders. There's been a lot of talk about the medical first responders, but we also need to take care of our mental health first responders. And you know, now is a great time for people who normally would not seek out treatment. Everything is being done by telehealth now. You know, there's no boundaries. If you prefer to have a Chinese American therapist and you don't live by one, your insurance company will pay for telehealth sessions. Now, great time for folks who normally back off of treatment to look for it in the privacy of their own homes.
Pearl, is that something you've been seeing as well, the rise of telemedicine? And can you speak as well to what some of the insurance companies or policies might have changed or adapted to this current situation?
Yeah, I'm flooded. I have a lot of clients, and what Dr. Brown is saying is completely true. A lot of the major ones, insurances, I would say almost all of them are, in light of COVID and just this, you know, harsh financial situations that everyone has been going with layoffs, whatever situation, trying to get unemployment, trying to get benefits for you and your family. It's been a very difficult time for everyone. So they have been waiving all of cost sharing. So that's been very helpful for the clients. And I really have appreciated them doing that. It has definitely helped us in the continuation of treatment, where we wouldn't have to break treatment, because that was definitely a fear at the very beginning of COVID, of the onset. So it's been very beneficial. A lot of clients have, as you can imagine, increased the frequency of their therapy sessions. A couple clients have gone from doing once a week to twice a week. So for ourselves, I think that it's really important, like Dr. Brown was saying, for us caring for the caregivers, for us to not burn out as well, just so for us to make sure that we're maintaining our mental health so that we can be the best for our clients as well.
Certainly. And this is something that you know, many people talk about, the new situations, the stressors, and the fact that we can talk so openly about it, I hope gives others comfort to know that what they experience and what they feel is not, they're not in isolation. Can all of you, and maybe starting with Dr. Chen, also speak a bit to the shifting dynamics even in relationships? We hear about now couples are dealing with having more time together than ever before, and how that's how you view that and how that's been manifesting.
That is a very interesting and ongoing question I'm still learning about. I'm all of a sudden getting floods of emails for couples therapy, which I usually prefer not to do online because I miss so much information. With just looking at the picture, the dynamic, I can't really get a good handle on. But the demands are so high right now. that I do take more than before. A couple of very interesting things I just like to share with you. This case I recently got, the COVID-19's effects are sometimes unpredictable and beyond my imagination. I don't know if you have heard about, with the internet age, a lot of people it's easy to find people these days. So I've heard stories about, how people found their childhood first love and then they get reconnected and then go back.
Yeah.
So I hear about this before. But this recently I had this person, who's been married for decades. And there are absolutely issues that have been there, but the person has been just very busy and not thinking about it. But now, they've been working from home for a long time, and she started thinking, what does this marriage mean to her? What does she want in her life? All these philosophical questions are coming to her mind, and at the same time, her childhood love is also locked down and started thinking about these things and started to search for her. And obviously it's not hard these days, so he found her and reached out to her and expressed to her that leaving her when they were 20 was the biggest mistake of his life. And he wanted to get back with her. So all these things are happening, that people can't have control over. So this person, this woman, as I was working, with her, it was unpredictable to me that in the end, she would decide to leave them both. And I find this developing in the context of COVID-19 and the lockdown and the quarantines to be something that either one of them didn't predict, and it's life-changing. So I think that is just one incident in one case that I'm seeing the effects of this pandemic on the individual level, on intimacy. But other than that, I think a lot of us, I think, Dr. Brown and Pearl could speak to that as well, that we're seeing a lot of marital issues, intimacy issues surfacing earlier on and more intensely because of the increased interactions among family members. So that is certainly a big challenge and something that we're all witnessing and learning together.
What I would say to that is that I think we have seen in both the COVID-19 and the racial pandemic that's going on right now, this brings out the best of people and the worst in people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Suddenly being thrown together 24/7 with your spouse or your children, or your children who are returning home from college prematurely. It's like every negative thing about each other is under a microscope, and there's no escape of leaving the house every day. And when you look at what happened with your client, Dr. Chen, the brain, then you're probably better to speak to this than I am, but the brain will search for self-medicating ways to make ourselves feel better, right? So being contacted by a long lost love gets all of our happy hormones going, and we're self-medicating at a very difficult time. And the poor schlub that you're with in your house cannot possibly measure up to that. So it's just it's like being in a pressure cooker. And I really feel for the families who have adult children that have returned home. I mean, for example, one of my clients had a daughter that is trying to get a breakout on Broadway. She was in New York. Her parents are supporting her financially. They brought her home when all of this started, right? It's like, she's going to be in lockdown there, she can be in lockdown at home. And he's reached out to me several times because he's not used to her being there. And, so there's a lot of guilt associated with that as well. Like, gosh, I wish she was back where she went. Where really he had this idealized vision of her and missing her, right?
Yep.
So, I think what we have to do and what we have to focus on is helping, and what we try to teach our students is helping individuals find their own coping mechanisms, something that can take them out of their instant, their surroundings, even if in their mind. And I will stop talking about that because I imagine, Pearl, you have some thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Brown, what you just said made me think of a lot of my college or my high school seniors that graduated and weren't able to have their rites of passage, right? They weren't able to have prom, they weren't able to have the graduation, which luckily now a lot of them are doing the delayed situation with the walking across the stage. But a lot of them, I heard today that there was a client who her mom had all of them get together now that the lockdown is lifted, and they all got Corona diplomas, right? Where it's like you not only survived your senior year of high school, but you also survived the coronavirus. So they had an actual, ceremony for that, just to make it extra special for them. Because you're grieving losses that you never thought you would, and these things that you just thought were assumed. I'm going to go to college next year. Well, wait, I don't know if we're going to have online class or are we going to be in person moving in, right? We don't know if we're going to actually start university the way we envisioned it in our mind. So for them, it's a huge mental shift to be able to adapt to that different environment. A lot of the parents, with a few of them, speaking of the couples, I definitely agree with what you're saying about we see the best and the worst, because with some clients, I've gotten to do more sessions than I ever thought I could because of the fact that they're so willing and able now, right? They're at home together and both husband and wife are working at home. So it's almost like this forced marriage retreat in a way, right? You're able to kind of have, you kind of have this sense, okay, well, same time tomorrow, can we meet, because a lot of people are like, well, look, on my lunch break, I would love to do something that's productive. And, why don't we work on some communication skills? Why don't we work on some things that right here in vivo that are happening right now, right? So it's been very helpful in that sense, just to get the real time issues, as opposed to, oh, well, it happened a week ago, you know what I mean? As opposed to like, it's fresh in the moment, so let's deal with it now, kind of like a triage type situation.
Certainly. There's a lot of, all three of you have touched upon really interesting and complicated dynamics, and also the best and the worst coming out in society. And so, of course, one of the big issues that has come to light recently in the US, our history of systemic racism, and also with COVID and what some might even call the China virus, quote unquote, anti-Asian sentiment. Could all of you speak a bit to that, and how that's impacting the communities you work with, and what coping mechanisms or even ways of expressing feelings you found to be productive given all of that? And we can start with anyone. Maybe we'll start with Pearl, because I know that this is something that a lot of your clients have been facing.
Yeah, when I'm thinking about it, a lot of my clients, they range from, I see ages 14 to probably 70 at this point. And it's a great representation. I think I have a pretty diverse mix. I would say about 25 to 30% of them are Asian American or of Asian descent. And amongst those, I definitely think a lot of people have been enraged, rightfully so, when they hear racial slurs. In the same way that, we also feel enraged for the Black community with dealing with a lot of their animosity, which has been historically there. I think on just this, in speaking of the Asian Americans, it's brought to light a lot of microaggressions that have always been there, but we have not dealt with. And so the talk about systemic racism has really brought out a lot of the issues that have laid dormant. And it's been very helpful, because I think a lot of people, a lot of clients realize that things are actually a problem when they may have been maybe brushing it off, or maybe not had thought that it had anything to do with them, especially personally. So now it's kind of making them question back to, oh, so that's what happened when I was 7, or that's what happened when I was 12. And it's brought up a lot of childhood types of trauma. So me personally, in my work, I've seen a lot of people where we are digging up very old wounds, but it really does give light to a lot of personality traits right now, as well as a lot of mindsets. So it's actually exposing a lot of roots that we maybe wouldn't have known that were there. In terms of coping with it, a lot of clients have really taken to doing more blogging, more advocacy, taking to social media to try to find that sense of community. There is a group on Facebook right now that talks about, you know, specific Asian American racism that came out of COVID, right? So there is that community there right now, and I believe that their presence is pretty strong. And I've heard that there's been a lot of activism in that thread. And that's been a home for a lot of people, and really giving voice to the voiceless, because historically Asian Americans and Asian people in general have been more passive and have not really taken that stance. So I think this has been kind of a breath of fresh air for them to be able to have that safe space.
Definitely. And Dr. Brown, I'm very cognizant too that during your, during your introduction, you talked about the importance of allyship. And first of all, thank you so much for being an ally, and for also all the work that you do with the Michigan School of Psychology and your students. Can you talk more about allyship and how to forge more connections, and how Asians can be allies to Black Lives Matter, and how others can be allies to the Asian community, and other ways of supporting each other?
Wow, that's a big question. I had some thoughts on my mind with that tie into this with the last question that you asked. So if I could just sort of free associate that for a moment. I think that as a white person, when I think about, and this is what we have to do, we have to think about this. It would be very easy for me to turn off the television, to get off social media, because everything is so painful to watch right now. And it's not that I don't take breaks, but I feel like I'm not going to exercise that privilege to turn away, because that's part of the problem. You know, I need to feel what people of color and marginalized populations feel every day. Until white people do that, we are not going to be able to do the self-work that is required to erase racism in this country. So when I think about, you know, what's happening racially against the backdrop of a pandemic where a disproportionate number of African Americans are dying. When I think about Asian Americans who have their own losses of life and cases in your own communities, while having to be blamed, while people are blaming you and calling it the China virus, you know, I think, you know, how can we not be allies? I mean, how can we not speak up? And I think that, you know, your question about how do we do that? How can Asian Americans support Blacks? How can Blacks support Asian Americans? You know, how can everybody support the gay population, and the gender minority population? Is through understanding. I mean, we at school, you know, our students are so angry right now, and they are, and justifiably so, not at us, but what are, you know, asking the questions, what are we going to do about it? Well, as an academic institution, we can speak out against racism. We can educate our students and faculty about multiculturalism, but we can't fix this problem by ourselves. And so I think the way that we all support each other is by making it a point to understand. I think the saying goes, speak. Let me think about this for 1 second. Speak to be understood, and listen to understand. And if we can frame our conversations within the construct of learning from one another, it's the only way that we can break down these barriers. Making a very public statement about what we will and will not tolerate. And taking a risk because it makes us vulnerable. I mean, institutions lose students. You know, that can't be for us as a humanistic institution, that can't be at the forefront of what we do. Does that help? I don't know.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Okay.
And Dr. Chen, your thoughts, and also when you spoke about being a triple minority, that really, you know, resonated. And so as someone who's so empathetic and who's now living in Asia, but who is Asian American, would just really appreciate your thoughts on all the things that Francis and Dr. Brown have also said.
Yeah, I was thinking as Pearl and Dr. Brown were talking, I think from my limited experience, Asian Americans or Chinese Americans in particular have not been particularly outspoken about racism. Because in America, you know, I've had many experiences, but you know, I always say people are different. Some, you know, the same comment or the same stressor could mean very different things to different people.
Right.
So some people, you know, they just let them roll off their back. And people always ask me, you know, oh, being a woman, being a Chinese in America, that earlier on, at, you know, when I was 15, you know, you must face a lot of racism. And I would say, you know, I could hardly remember, but that, you know, I must have. I just don't remember them that much. And then when I think hard, oh, I remember minor things here and there. You know, and when I say that, people say, oh my God, it's unbelievable. But at the time, you know, they're like, oh, you're Chinese, you're okay, because, you know, Black people are lazy, Chinese people are fine. I mean, they'll just, you know, say that to my face. And back then it's fine. And they asked me, you know, oh, you're from Taiwan, do you have a toilet in your country, right? So all these
Do you
things.
have what?
Toilet in your country. Right, so a lot of times, you know, it's not bad people, it's just that they don't know, right? So that's you know, so in on the one hand is like, you know, you don't feel it. On the other hand is people becoming very sensitive to a initially just ignorance, right? An ignorant comment. So you know, it could mean a lot of different things to different people. So on the one hand, I think it's great that the new generation of Chinese Americans are coming out to speak up, and they feel enraged. And you know, as Dr. Brown was saying, you know, as a white person, I think this is what we should do. I was thinking, only if all white people are like you, right? So that would be great, you know. But you know, but that's a start, and it can't be just, you know, dependent on few people. So speaking up is important, but this is a mental health forum. So I was thinking, you know, emotions. Chinese Americans a lot of times tell me, you know, oh, it's not good to be so angry, you know, it's not good to be so emotional, and it's not good to be out of control. They equate emotions with out of control and with bad consequences. But I've been advocating emotion is our friend. It tells us what we think is important to us. When people say, you know, Chinese Americans are always this and that, how do you feel? If you feel nothing, that's not right or wrong. That means this is not an important issue to you. But if people say, you know, oh, Chinese people are hardworking, and you feel offended, that means they have touched upon something that's important to you. So don't be afraid of feeling those emotions. But, you know, Dr. Brown had mentioned, what do you do? What do you choose to do with those emotions? That's when you have to put a pause between experiencing your emotions and then rationally decide, well, okay, this is how I feel. This is what's important to me. What am I going to do about it? After carefully deliberating, you can still decide to do nothing. It's your choice. Don't let other people tell you, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. You know, so I think, you know, it's important. It is an important event. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to think, to feel, and to practice. You know, we can put emotion and rationalization together, not together, sequentially, right? So I think that's some of the thoughts that I have with regard to that.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. And certainly emotions are something that we all have. Feelings are things that everyone has. And yet many of you have touched upon this as well, the difference in generations, as well as immigration status, as well as what's culturally acceptable or perceived to be acceptable in one country or one context or another. are you seeing a lot of even culture clashes within how the current crisis is affecting everyone? And one example that I can even think of is I hear a lot of people talking about, you know, the younger generation wanting to go out and protest and showing their support, you know, during this time, and marching in the protests and demonstrations for Black Lives Matter. And then the older generation having very rightfully feelings of discomfort with this, because there's the issue of more exposure to the virus, and also perhaps the issue of not really feeling as strongly about demonstrations and other things. Is this something that's uniquely Asian, or is this something that is universally touching upon many people because of generational differences? And we can, any of the panelists can speak to this.
I think Dr. Brown would, I see that you have muted yourself, because immediately I thought about Italian Americans and yeah.
Yes, I'd like to answer this question both from the perspective as an activist, a mom, and a psychologist. And if I could just share a personal experience, my daughter is in her early 30s and is very much an ally to many communities, and was involved recently in organizing a peaceful protest march, and she was very excited about it. And I have a 5-year-old grandson, and she was going to take him to the march. And you know, as a parent, and I think this is probably true just based on the conversations we've previously had in the Asian community, certainly in the Italian community, our children are always our children in many communities, and probably all communities. The universal, you know, this child might be 32, but this is my child, and she's putting herself at risk. And now really she's going to take my grandson and put him at risk, which once we had a little chat about COVID, then that, but that's about as far as I could or would go with her, because this is where we have to put our money where our mouths are, so to speak. I mean, we can sit here and say, we don't like this and we don't like that, but then when our own children want to stand up against it, it's not fair to say, oh, do you really have to do that? Do you really have to put yourself at risk? You know, can have a conversation about it, but ultimately it's that that child who is an adult, that it is their decision. And I think as a parent, that is the hardest thing, one of the hardest things for me to deal with.
Grandmas don't get a say.
Pardon me?
Grandmas don't get a say.
Well, when
5-year-old. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know.
Impressive.
Yeah. And there's many times that things like that happen. But I learned, because I didn't like my parents telling me what I could and couldn't do when I was 40 years old and married and had 2 children. And I try not to do that. And so I just hope with each generation, we're getting better at that. And because we have a lot of love and protection, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
You're definitely in the minority. Either the white persons have to start, you know, listening to the pain, that's a minority. And being a parent saying, oh, I want to change, I don't want to do what my parents did to me, that's minority. Because most people, when they become parents, are like, oh yeah, now I know why my parents do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's,
you're right at home. You're a minority.
Yeah. And on behalf of the 30-year-old somethings, we thank you, Dr. Brown. Because I'm with your daughter on that one.
Absolutely. I get it. You know, and the
5-year-old.
He didn't go, honestly.
Oh, okay.
With me. He was with me.
Oh, good. Okay. I thought, okay.
Yeah. It's all about approach, you know. If you go in and say, are you really, you're going to take, and if you say, well, you know, COVID is still around. If you need somebody to watch them, I'd be happy to do it. Makes all the difference in the world, right?
Definitely.
That's a
definitely.
psychologist.
It's all about how you say it, not what you're saying.
Right.
And how you make people feel.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Definitely.
Well, I want to let the audience members know that there's a Q&A box, which we will be monitoring and taking questions from it. I'm having such a great time talking to the three panelists, but I want to give the audience a chance as well to ask their direct questions. And we also have, I was notified we had Brandon Liu in the audience, who is going to start at West Point this fall.
Yay,
and so
Brandon!
We're very, very excited for
Awesome.
him. Dr. Chen, who taught at West Point, can probably even give him some tips. I don't know about
That was many years ago.
We're really excited for Brandon. So
Brandon, let us see you. I see the box. Let's see you.
Maybe
Maybe he's trying.
I don't even see the box. Let me
I don't
play
see it
with
either.
this. Oh.
At the
Okay.
bottom?
Yeah,
Oh, I
see
see
it
it.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone.
Okay.
My-
We've scared him away. Okay, he's back.
Well, congratulations either way.
Congratulations, Brandon.
Thank you.
Technology can be very tricky. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Oh, there he goes.
Hi, hello.
Oh, he's there?
There
Hi,
he is.
Brandon.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats.
What will you be studying, Brandon?
Still not sure. Just gonna go there, get through the big 47th month experience. Yes.
Did you
Right.
just find out?
I found out back in probably September, like just telling me, oh, if I get everything, I can attend the military academy, and then got my appointment probably 4 months ago. So yes,
Wow,
very, very exciting.
Cool. Yeah.
that's quite an accomplishment.
We're so excited for you, Brandon.
Yeah. How are you feeling about it?
I'm excited. Still not too sure what to expect. So if I can hear from Dr. Chen, that'd be wonderful. Just hear.
You two need to have an offline conversation, maybe. Huh?
Exactly. We'll
Right.
connect you.
Maybe a session. Yeah.
Well, but the uncertainty that a lot of students are facing right now sounds like a very universal, something very universal they're dealing with. And Pearl, when you said that many people are grieving the loss of things they never even realized that they were going to lose, like rites of passage, graduations, commencements, orientations, things like that, it really resonated. Do any of you have thoughts or things you've observed that have been really useful for commemorating these milestones? Because obviously for students like Brandon graduating high school and going into the service academies, for other students or young adults graduating and going out into the quote unquote real world, what are ways that we can celebrate them and to give them that emotional feeling of closure in one way and kind of commencement in another?
I feel like that's a question for me. I mean, I know what we're doing for our students. One thing that we're doing, we have many first generation graduate students. And so for these students and their families, it's super important to have a commencement. And so what we've decided is we will have a commencement. If it has to be in January of 2021, we will have a commencement with
Wow.
and whistles. And they've seemed very grateful. Some of them have asked for their caps and gowns now. We were just going to hang on to them until commencement. They're asking for them now because their families want to take pictures with them. So we're letting them do that. So we've committed to do that for them. We also are going to do, I have a kind of a cool little convertible car. And so for our doctoral students who normally get a special ceremony honoring their research and so forth, I'm going to take their dissertation chair and we're going to go on the road and bring them a diploma frame and take pictures and toot our horns and just kind of, we don't want what we're doing to replace a commencement, but we want to honor the graduation day in that way. So we'll do that as well. I think that from a psychological perspective, I feel like I'm really monopolizing here, but
No, please go ahead.
okay. from a psychological perspective, I think that people like me who have been around a lot longer than the graduates.
This is not true.
Oh, well, maybe in this lifetime. How's that? I have experienced intense disappointment in my life over various things, and I'm not saying my experience is the same as anything that these kids who are missing prom or whatever are through, but I've had deep disappointment, and I also know that I have survived it. And I think that the only thing that we can do, because I mean, I feel so bad that these students are missing this stuff, but I think that we just have to help people understand to rely on their own resilience. How have they gotten through other disappointments? Let them tap into those feelings, and also to instill hope in our young people, that not to discount the disappointment that they're feeling now, but instill the hope that this isn't going to be this way forever, and that there will be other celebrations and other times where they will be able to feel that joy. Beyond that, I mean, it is what it is. What can you really say?
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And an audience member had a question that I think does tie into a lot of the points that you were just making as well, which is, how does one cope with something as traumatic as death that's caused by COVID-19 and during COVID-19? And I think part of the difficulty, of course, is that for funerals and large gatherings, that's no longer possible right now. So any of the panelists can speak to that, about coping and about grief during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. I had a client who lost 3 grandparents in the time of COVID. And prior to, 2 of them were fairly healthy, right? One of them had complications and was in hospice, and it just so happened that, like sequentially, they all throughout the duration passed. And actually with one of them, the family didn't even hear, because it was during the beginning, and so they didn't even hear about it until after, right? They didn't know that it was actually going to be happening, so they didn't find out until a month after, right? So it's been all kinds of losses upon losses, and it's been extremely sad and hard for the families to deal with. I would say that, a lot of the client that I'm talking about, she made it a point to celebrate all of their lives. So her and her family, she kind of spearheaded they put together like a video montage of each of the grandparents, like separately. And then they already have save the dates for when it's completely lifted, when quarantine's completely lifted, they're going to have an actual ceremony, like a funeral for a memorial for each person. So kind of going into the planning of that kind of shifts your focus into thinking that, this still will happen even if I can't do it right now, but I can still have the procedures that I want to for them. It's a very trying time. And I know that, grief it's not linear, right? So there's going to be feelings, there's going to be immense feelings. And it's like a roller coaster. So just being able to understand that that's okay. There's other people who have passed away due to suicide. And so, it's really important right now that we have that awareness, that suicide it's a real thing for people who are depressed and struggling with depression. And so for us to be cognizant of that, and just to make sure that we are reaching out to people, even though there's nothing that we can do to prevent those things. However, offering resources and making sure we reach out to people who even seem fine is very important. And so, definitely grieving the losses. Again, another plug for a reason to go to therapy. And even if, people that you're talking about, I'm not sure if that was you who, said that, or if it's your friend who, is dealing with that. But even if you think that you're okay and that you're fine, I would still recommend that you talk to a therapist, even if you just talk the one time, just to see if it's something that suits you, because you don't realize until you get into that type of setting, like how much you actually do have to say. And the people around you may not be equipped to really deal with it when they're also in that grief with you.
Definitely. And this is, that's obviously it's very important to know to be able to reach out to people and check in on them, because not everyone knows to reach out to others to say that they need help. Another question from the audience that segues from that is, mental health is often stigmatized in communities of color. How does one start these conversations with their parents? And then I think this is specific to the Asian American community. For parents, how do they start the conversations with their children, especially if the parents are more comfortable speaking one language and expressing themselves fully in one language, and the children tend to speak English if they're second-generation immigrants?
I'm sorry to jump in for a second. I actually was thinking about something related to the previous question.
Sure.
So is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Because I see this a lot, and I find it to be very important in terms of dealing with death. And as Pearl said, it's important to reach out, to check in, and to just be available. Especially in the Chinese community, I do see this in America and in other communities as well. People a lot of times generally feel uncomfortable talking about comforting people after traumatic events. They don't know what to say. They, this is terrible, but I don't know what to say. So they say the weirdest things. So in the hospital, I worked as a chaplain in hospice. I see people say, people who have experienced loss, say, oh, it's okay, you lose someone, but God has gained an angel. How is that helping me? So I think it's important to learn to just be available. You don't have to say anything, because a lot of times we say things out of our own discomfort. Like, we feel so uncomfortable. We want to be helpful, especially, in closed Chinese community. This is terrible. So I have to say something that's be of comfort to you right now. But in the end, that's serving my need, not your need. So,
Yeah.
I think it's really important to give the people who are grieving the space and the style that they need to recover and to grieve. And what we can do as people who are, close by, is to make ourselves available. Like, I'm here, I feel this, I'm right here, standing right here with you. So one thing I remember a lot is that when I worked as a chaplain was that we see a lot of traumatic events and deaths. And we all learn about these things in the process. And sometimes we get cards coming back from the patients. And never have I gotten a card said, chaplain, what you said was so helpful. Never did I get a card like that. But I've got many, many cards that said, I remember you were there. So I think presence is important, and we need to resist our impulse to say something, to do something helpful. While when it's probably paradoxical that the most helpful thing we can do is nothing but just to be there, because presence is most important. So I'm sorry, I was just thinking that, and sorry to disrupt here.
No,
it's
thank you.
important.
That was really great.
Okay, so probably you need to reiterate the next question. So, sorry.
Well, so presence is very important, and thank you so much for both Pearl and Dr. Chen for giving tangible tips for how to help those who are grieving and how to really just be there for them. And the other question was about mental health and the stigmatization of mental health in communities of color, and how parents and children start that conversation with each other. And sometimes, and I think this ties into that point about presence, sometimes for children, they just want to feel supported. And sometimes the language barrier and the cultural context can prevent those feelings of mutual support. So what practical advice do you have, or what are ways in which you've seen the communities you've worked with dealing with this?
Yeah, I can answer that. I can speak to that. And it actually ties into something that Dr. Chen just spoke about, which is that internalization, right? Like, sometimes we think that in this moment, I have to do something because what they're doing, it has to be in this moment, I have to either prove myself, or what they're feeling is a reflection of what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. And so we make it about us, right? And so as it relates to the parent and the child in specifically Asian American communities, I've also seen this in other minority communities as well. But a lot of times it becomes a conversation, it quickly becomes shifted to what the parents' needs are for the child, right? Not what the child's needs are for themselves, because they might not even know what their needs are because they've been in a very submissive role for a very long time. So I pose it like this. let's say you go to, and this actually happened to me 2 years ago. I got a root canal, right? The worst thing ever, right? Because, especially because it was at the beginning of the year, so I hadn't met my deductible yet. So it's just you know, financially and painful, right? So it's the worst situation. So going through that, right, I was like, okay, well, maybe this wouldn't have happened, Pearl, if you went to your cleaning, right? Or maybe this wouldn't have happened if you didn't push something off.
That's so
right?
typical.
You know, and of course I'm like blaming myself, which was true. You know, I definitely shouldn't have done that. I prioritized something else instead of that. But when looking at it, right, when you look at therapy, maybe we can look at it in terms of dental cleaning, right? You go an annual cleaning. Some people go biannually, like if needed. And so when you go, you get a cleaning, and sometimes they find something, like sometimes you have a filling, sometimes you have a cavity, but most likely if you do your normal checks, you'll find something before it gets to the point where you have a sore root canal, right? Where it gets to the nerve. And at that point, it's sometimes too late. You need emergency root canal, right? Because it's excruciating, where you can't even exist because you're in so much pain, right? You can't sleep, nothing. So the thing is, we have to kind of shift to a preventative approach instead of a reactive approach. I really feel like that's a good starting point in terms of describing the fact that you'd rather find out something and say that, look, it's not, you know, we can still work with this. It hasn't reached all areas of this person's life yet. However, if we don't do anything about this, this could lead to something very, very bad. And so we really want to take that approach in terms of making them see. And I think that sometimes it's more relatable, right? A lot of Asian Americans, you know, feel like maybe, and this is no knock to, you know, anyone in the medical field, but a lot of people feel that a doctor or a lawyer is like a most accomplished, you know, accomplished field to be in. So I think that using that type of medical analogy might really pierce through a lot of the stigma, and be able to kind of link and see it for what it is in like a zoomed out type situation.
Can I just add one thing, Joyce, or did you need?
Yes. No, go ahead, please.
So anytime that we can affect real change, it's painful. And especially if we are trying to break down generations of stigma or ways of being, sometimes we just have to dive in and do it. There's no easy way to do it. I mean, when I have worked with my clients about coming out, for example, and how they are so afraid to tell their parents, and walking them through, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, then what's the worst thing that can happen? And then what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, they come to the realization is, I mean, their parents aren't going to stab them on the spot, but it's going to be a very painful conversation. That doesn't mean that we don't have it. If they want to, I would never tell somebody they had to, if they didn't want to. But if they want to, then creating that space that says to them, it's going to hurt like hell. And, you know, so having the conversation about therapy with parents who are diametrically opposed to it, it's probably not going to go well. Probably isn't. But maybe it has to be done in order for, you know, this could be the generation now that could start to turn that ginormous ship of stigma around. You know, it's at personal cost, but working with clients to help them understand that they will survive it through it. I mean, I don't mean it to sound so simplistic, because I know it's extremely difficult. But again, I think this is the second time I'm saying it is what it is. Sometimes we cannot protect our loved ones from the pain.
Are there ways that you suggest to your clients, Dr. Brown, about finding common ground or focusing on, you know, their parents' love for them or protection for them? Because sometimes what I see is that the stigma exists just because parents are so afraid that this is a sign that their child is unwell, and they feel personally guilty that they didn't protect their child enough, and that there's all these other things wrapped up in it.
Well, I think there's that, and that's a large part of it, but I think also it's also about what will other people think. So I think that as the person that's doing the telling or the asking or the educating, it's really upon us to communicate what's at stake here. You know, I have to do this because if I don't, I'm not going to make it, or whatever it is, because love, I'll use this word, love trumps hate, and parents love their children. And know that their child, I mean, in most cases, I'm grossly generalizing here, but in most cases, I think that parents just want their kids to be okay. And so yes, trying to find common ground and to communicate to their parents or their older generation that this is something I have to do for my survival. Having that frank of a talk might help.
Well, I'm out of curiosity for like Joyce and Pearl, younger people, you know, and Dr. Brown, I was just gonna say, when you say you have a 30-some-year-old daughter, I was like, okay, so you had her when you were 12.
Oh, you're so sweet.
But no, I mean, but anyway, but to the younger generation, do you really see seeking mental health still as a stigma? Because in the U.S., I do feel like I actually don't sense that as much. But since coming back to Asia, you know, I was back here 10 years ago for a bit, and now 10 years later, I'm back. I find that people have changed a lot in terms of their willingness to seek mental health and mental health assistance and all these, you know, what's available to them. So I wonder, do you still feel that, you know, it's a, I mean, I know parents was like, I still see people, you know, say like, you're going to a psychologist, like, what, are you crazy? You know, or you know, I still hear people say that, but you know, people just sort of you know, not respond to those as much as before. So I wonder, do you still in the Asian American community, do you still see that as a struggle for younger generations?
What do you think, Joyce?
Well, I think that to Dr. Chen's point, it's definitely less stigmatized than in other generations, but I wouldn't say that among that it's 100%, you know, open, or that everyone seeks the help that they need. In general, part of it is because people perhaps don't even understand, and this is something that we could ask all three panelists about. You know, what are the signs even of knowing that you need mental health help, or that it would be good as a preventative measure? I think people still haven't, at least in my perception, gotten into the mindset that this is something good just as like a preventative measure. This is something normal. Everyone has this in different forms. And so
I think that's too far advanced. I totally agree with Pearl, but I think that's like way advanced because, you know, prevention work is just not glorious. You know, you can run in if there's a fire already, you're going and put out the fire, you're a hero. But what can you prove to me you prevented the fire? You can't. That's prevention work, you know, like, you know, you guys don't have quarantine there. We have quarantine here from, you know, first, you know, it's just crazy, but it was working out well for Taiwan that, you know, anyone coming back, you know, now has mandatory 14-day quarantine. People are complaining. Some people are complaining, like, why do I really need quarantine? You know, you just wasted 14 days of my life. See, nothing happened. Well, of course, if you prevented something, nothing happened. You can't prove that, right? So I think that's really advanced. But you know, Joyce, you said 100%. I think that's like in general. That's not Asian American. Like in general, I don't think we'll ever get like 100% support, or you know, you go see
acceptance. Yeah.
right. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I just want to get the pulse of the current state of you know, perception of mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Joyce. Like, it's definitely diminished in terms of the stigma because I think that there's been more awareness. I mean, because I think that a lot of celebrities, right, have been very open about the fact that, you know, they see a therapist, and a lot of other like, you know, the trickle down effect has been a lot of younger generations are very open about, okay, well, oh, you don't have a therapist, right? Like, what's wrong with you? You know, like, so they've been very more open about it and more progressive. I would say, you know, in terms of your, you know, like the preventative comment. I think that the trend that I'm seeing, especially at my practice, is that they are seen, but it might be, there's two camps. One camp is that the parent initiates for them and says, you need to fix my kid because something is wrong with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Love that.
Then the other camp is like an adult, right? Who's in their 20s, 30s, right? Even 40s, who realizes, wow, like I just realized that what I went through was trauma. So I think that there's this gap of like emerging adults that might be, 17, 18, like in that to maybe 25, like that area, who I think are still, it's definitely getting there. It's definitely getting there where they are more aware, but I do feel like there's still a lot of work to be done in that area.
Yeah. But I think I didn't want to disrupt Joyce's important question about what are the signs. So maybe.
Yeah, well, I think one of the last questions, because we're running close on time, but just for the audience, what are the signs that someone should be seeking help, or if they don't know, to the point that we made before about just being there, being present, being available. If they don't know to ask for help explicitly, what are things that friends, family, and others can do? And so both from the self-diagnosis standpoint of saying, like, perhaps I have depression, perhaps I should seek professional help, to the kind of bystander / observer / loved one, what are things that people should be looking out for?
Well, I'll speak to one and then I'll let the others maybe take another. We're all experiencing isolation right now, social isolation. But I think one thing to look for is, really personal isolation. If you see a loved one or a friend who just stays in their room all the time, or doesn't engage in their usual way, changes in behavior, changes in sleeping habits. That's a big one. If you have a family member who's not sleeping well, getting up at, in the middle of the night, that kind of thing, where their sleep is being disturbed, just behavioral changes and isolation are big.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that if, in terms of the change of behavior, more specifically too, you could also see if someone is more nervous or tense than usual, definitely in like a nonverbal cues. Like, let's say they don't usually jitter, but they're jittering, or their leg is can't stop moving. They can't sit still. That might be a sign of anxiety, where they feel like they're on edge, or they might be really tense a lot more. And they're walking around. Again, that does go with sleep as well, but definitely in the signs of in the daytime where, or they might say that, oh, I just freaked out for a moment, right? But they say that a lot, right? So that's like, the freak out could be a panic attack, right? But they don't know that it is, because they might just say, oh, well, that happens a lot. Well, that means you've had it a lot, right? That you've had panic attacks a lot. So that could be a sign of that as well.
I think irritability too.
Yeah.
Irritability is a big one. Personality change.
Right.
I'll just speak to the last point. If you see someone that you're concerned about, what do you do? Sometimes we just speak our mind. Maybe you should seek professional help. And 9 out of 10 times people are offended by that comment. So I think, we could back up a second. You want to say something because you care about the person. You notice there's a difference. Well, say that. Just say that, because I notice that you haven't been sleeping well. I noticed that you've been jittery. So are you okay? Whether to seek what kind of help is their decision to make. You can observe and communicate your concern and the difference that you've noticed, and then together you can explore options. Mental health assistance is one option. So not to just jump into conclusions and say you need to see a counselor, a psychologist. People might get offended.
Definitely. Well, thank you all for those very practical tips. I guess in closing, we would just ask that each of the panelists, first of all, this has been such a great and inspiring conversation, and we would appreciate it if each of the panelists sort of give some concluding remarks, just about how to transition back into the new normal and any practical advice or tips or even resources that their own organizations are offering to help everyone in the community. So we can start with Dr. Brown first.
Yeah, I'm looking for my note here. I'm so glad you asked. Well, I would say in general, it's really important, and Pearl spoke to this, and I'll just reiterate that it's really important for individuals to reach out. And I would say maybe even more so for individuals in the Asian community during this time of increased aggression, maybe over, where this virus supposedly came from, to reach out electronically, look for groups, look for support, because suffering alone is not good. Trying to sort this all out in your own mind is not good. Sharing the load with other people who truly understand what you're going through is really helpful. So I would say that in summary, don't suffer alone. And then I just want to offer that the Michigan School of Psychology has a mental health training clinic that is open right now. At the current time, we're doing phone sessions, we're doing telehealth, we're doing Zoom sessions. The clinic has been set up for individuals who either don't have or don't want to use their insurance. Right now, deductibles and copays are so high. Maybe there's patients that don't want other members of the family to know that they're getting treatment, and so they don't want to use their insurance. For whatever reason, we offer low-cost counseling psychology services that run from $5 to $35 an hour. And these are master's and doctoral students who are under the supervision of fully licensed psychologists who review the cases each week. These are very high quality students that are doing this work. So if anybody has a need for that type of therapy, it's convenient right now, even if you don't live in Oakland County or Farmington Hills, because of telehealth. So I want to give you some contact information. The phone number of our clinic director is Dr. Jim Maher. He can get you scheduled for an appointment, and the number is 248-919-0063. 248-919-0063. We do have openings. The clinic has only been open, it opened right before COVID hit. So we were able to see a few people in person, but we've gone completely online now. So we do have openings. And then there's also on our website, the Michigan School of Psychology website is msp.edu. You can learn more about us there, but also specifically about the clinic, it's at msp.edu/clinic. It has its own page, talks about fees and location and so forth. So if you need some help, I hope you'll reach out. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Chen?
No, I just want to steal what Dr. Brown said. There's no need to suffer alone. So please don't suffer alone. That's all.
And Pearl, last but not least.
Yes. Well, I will also say that you need not suffer alone. I'm really glad. I really appreciated this time to spend with you guys. I would say you asked about re-entry. I would say to take it slow. It's normal to have some anxiety when you go back into reintegrating back into your, again, new normal, right? Because it won't be back to the place that we once left it, but it'll be different, and you're different. So just respecting yourself and listening to your body and trying to listen to what you need, and not trying to just rush back into, trying to get back into that normalcy, but trying to understand what's changed now. I would also say that I work at Perspectives of Troy Counseling Centers. We have different locations. Our main location is in Troy, Michigan, on Big Beaver between Crooks and Livernois, on the 14th floor of the Tryon building of the 888 West Big Beaver building. A lot of people know because it's right by Shake Shack.
Oh, yum.
And yeah, we have also Sterling Heights, Plymouth, Novi, Clarkston. And we are also doing telehealth right now. All of our sessions are on telehealth. We have 4 different phases of, you know, re-entering right now. So it's safe to say we can do all telehealth. We also have interns as well. So I don't know if it's as good of a deal as Dr. Brown's. She might have a better deal. But we do have interns who can see cash. I believe it's $20 or $25 for a session. Our website is perspectivesoftroy.com. And then our main number is 248-244-8644. Once again, it's 248-244-8644. What else? We also offer EMDR, and then we also do DBT informed therapy. We have a lot of DBT therapists, as well as me included. We also have TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Yeah, so we're a pretty big agency. We've been there for a long time. Have about like 40 some therapists. So yeah, don't be shy to reach out. If you have any questions, you can always call this number. And now that if you're listening right now, you could contact me. You can ask for me. It goes directly to my voicemail, and then I could reach back out if you have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you. And for all 3 panelists, do we have your permission to share the information that you just verbally gave over email or to all the registered participants, so that they can have that information of, you know, email or phone number or contact?
Sure.
Yes, definitely.
I'll send Sharon the links to our page.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We will definitely be
too.
sending that out to everyone who registered. And thank you all for your active participation. The panelists, Pearl and Dr. Chen, Dr. Brown, this has just been an incredible conversation. And truly, I've learned a lot. And I hope that we all feel that we're not alone, and that regardless of the fluctuations of feelings and emotions that can arise because of COVID, because of the racial attacks and racism that we've seen both in the news and perhaps personally in our communities, and even death in the families, we certainly are not alone. We have a great community supporting us through ACA, and also fantastic resources represented and exemplified by all 3 panelists. And so thank you all so much for tuning in. Please stay connected with ACA through the website and through the Facebook page that you can see here. And thank you so much again to our panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Grace, who left us? We were.
Oh, Dr. Chen?
Yeah.
Oh, we need her.